technology.
Nobody knows more about environmental impact statements.
I understand the tax laws better than almost anyone.
He'll take your questions on everything from baseball deals
Nobody knows more about trade than me.
to children's gifts.
Nobody has better toys than I do.
Ask Trump can improve your vocabulary.
I know words. I have the best words.
Audiences enjoy it so much it feels like a religious experience.
Nobody loves the Bible more than I do.
Ask Trump is so successful the critics are going nuclear.
There's nobody that understands the horror of nuclear better than me.
You were as astonished by me at this latest revelation. There's been a drip of leaks coming to the Sunday Times about Charles's charitable trust taking £1 million from the bin Laden family, even though there are relatives who were not connected to Osama by the time of the 9/11 attacks.
Yeah.
It's just a massive misjudgment, is it not?
I thought Stephen Glover in the Mail put it beautifully. How can someone so intelligent be so stupid? Which, of course, we can apply, across much of our public life. Look, Charles has no judgment, and I think maybe the best thing, now that he's getting on a bit, is why doesn't he just retire and spend some more time talking to his plants? Because clearly, he is going to be a threat. And when I say a threat, I don't just mean to the monarchy. I mean to the Commonwealth. I mean to the English-speaking world. I mean to this remarkable organisation currently having their games up in Birmingham, which will be, I think, if it's used properly, our main defence against the two twin threats that I talked about just a moment ago. And clearly, Charles, and I'm sorry to say this, because, I've met him a few times. He's a nice man. I mean, people that talk to plants are often quite nice, but he's utterly useless. He lacks judgment. He clearly has political opinions that are not in line, not only, Dan, with what you and I think, but actually with where the centre of the country is. I mean, it's very funny. I walked through the Mall on that Thursday of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. I mean, that was the best focus group Nigel Farage could ever do, because I spoke to thousands of people as it took me hours to get to the front. I mean, if you ask them, did they agree with Prince Charles that the Rwanda policy was appalling? I doubt you'd have got more than 2%. He's out of touch with the people he potentially wants to lead. He is a threat to the monarchy. He is a threat to the Commonwealth. He is a threat to the integrity of the English-speaking world. And I just wish he could change. But hey, old dogs, new tricks, I doubt it.
At the very least, Nigel, just finally, don't you think it's essential that everything is released now? All of the dealings have to become public. We have to have full transparency with this charity, because, Nigel, if these sorts of revelations continue once he's on the throne, there could be a serious constitutional crisis. We need to know now while the Queen is still alive and kicking.
As I know myself, having been a victim of the Times newspapers, the Sunday Times newspapers, they tend to build a locker full of stories and release them drip by drip by drip. And the more that comes out, the more damaging it becomes. If there's more out there, and because of the charity guidelines, of course, they don't have to declare where the money came from. And I also, Dan, don't know what the Sunday Times' agenda is. It could just be a journalist looking for big stories. I find it hard to believe that they've become Republican overnight, but you're absolutely right. Get all the bad news out of the way as quickly as possible. Drip, drip, drip is a disaster. Hey, didn't Boris Johnson find that?
No.
Actually, with Boris, it was little bit by little bit. Salami slice by salami slice.
Death by 1,000 cuts, right?
Yeah, that's right. And the danger is, Boris will go on and make millions in America. He'll be fine. The Conservative Party was actually in trouble anyway. But with Charles, this is about more than him, his reputation, his integrity. This is about the future of something very big, very significant, and that heads up a Commonwealth with 2.3 billion people in it. Add the Americans onto that, you've got almost half the planet. And, this really matters.
No, indeed. Couldn't agree more. Nigel Farage, and of course, Farage back 7 o'clock.
The public has suddenly grown tired of the monotone of militarized propaganda, militarized mendacity from the mainstream media, particularly on the issue of Ukraine. They're still debating whether American missiles fired from Ukraine at a prison in the liberated Donbass, which killed hundreds of prisoners of war, came from Ukraine or came from Russia. The Daily Mail ran a cyclist who narrowly escaped death in Leninsky Prospect, which might have been a clue as to where it stood on the map in Ukraine these days. And it actually said this cyclist escaped death by a second as Russians shelled Donetsk, which has been liberated territory from the Kiev regime for more than 8 years, and flies the Russian flag. They're still unable to tell their audience in the general public of North America, Europe, and the United Kingdom that the war is comprehensively lost, that the good money that continues to be thrown at it is good money after bad. They are still unable to tell their population that Russia controls almost half of the territory of Ukraine, or will do by the end of the summer. They're still unable to tell their population that despite hundreds of billions of pounds, euros, and dollars expended on the Ukrainian regime, much, if not most of it, has disappeared out the back door in the suitcases of the corrupt oligarchy of Ukraine. An oligarchy which they themselves routinely described as the most corrupt country in Europe. Year after year after year it won that prize, yet they are still giving it your money when you cannot afford, or soon won't be, to heat your home. Large families this winter in Britain will be spending 1/3 of their total take-home income on energy. 1/3. It will be thousands of pounds per year to heat your home. You'll have to choose between heating and eating. I've driven thousands of miles in the European mainland in the course of this summer, and I have never once paid anything remotely approaching the price that you in Britain are paying for petrol and for diesel. And we in the United Kingdom are not even dependent on Russian oil and gas. We've got our own oil. Only 5% of our gas came from Russia. So how come 1/3 of our wages are going to be spent on our gas and electricity bills? You'd need to ask the people who pass for the government of the United Kingdom about that. But the governments in Europe are going down like 9 pins. The Italian government has gone. The Bulgarian government has gone. The French president has lost his majority. Boris Johnson has lost his seat in 10 Downing Street. Joe Biden has lost his mind. The self-harm of the economic war that we have launched against Russia, as J.P. Morgan no less said today, is entirely self-harming. It is not harming Russia one little jot. Russia has wheeled its whole economy to the east, to the countries of Africa, of Asia, of Latin America, of the Eurasian heartland itself, Russia and China, and has not lost a cent, not 1 cent, as a result of the economic war that we have launched. And yet our leaders continue to double down on it. More fool us. Sorry to be blunt. If you're ready quietly to pay 1/3 of your wages in gas and electricity costs, there's nothing more I can do for you. If you are ready to go on supporting a war which is already lost. There's nothing much more I can do for you. If you're ready to continue to support governments like Biden's, like Boris's, soon to be Truss's, Sunak be as well chucking it, you know, he's going to get very badly embarrassed if he goes ahead in this contest. Liz Truss has already nailed on the dimmest 30-watt bulb prime minister that Britain has ever had, and we've had some stummers, I can tell you. If you're ready to continue to go quietly into that good night, there's nothing much more I can do for you, except shout myself hoarse by telling you the truth. You can tune into it if you like. You can accept it if you like. You can reject it if you like. But it is, for the moment, all that I can do. Now, the Sunday Times seems to be running something of a campaign against the heir to the throne, Charles Windsor. Mind you, he doesn't give them ammunition. It emerges in this morning's newspaper that Prince Charles has accepted 9 years ago, not that long after 9/11, accepted $1.2 million in a charitable donation from the Bin Laden family in Saudi Arabia, even though all his aides, advisors, warned him against doing so. It's a pity the government wasn't involved in that, by the way. It's a pity he didn't inform Number 10 that Bin Laden wanted to give him $1.2 million, should he accept it or not. Or maybe he did inform Downing Street and they just didn't do anything about it. I, for one, would like to know. Because if Prince Charles is going around like a bag lady, collecting millions of dollars in cash from plutocrats and corrupt potentates and the family of the world's biggest terrorist, Osama bin Laden, with his bag out, waiting for the cash to drop in, I, for one, want to know about it, and I certainly demand that my government should know about it. $1 million from Qatar, 1.2 million from bin Laden. How many more? How much more? And from where? What are we going to learn next? That some of the great train robbery money was banked at the Bank of Charles? Why do we have to depend on the Sunday Times to reveal these things? When will the heir to the British throne come clean and publish his accounts, cash donations and all? Tell us which rum chorus of characters he's been banking money from. I assume that he banked it, of course. It did come in cash, after all. If any politician had received $1.2 million from bin Laden in cash, he'd already have resigned. He'd already have been sacked. How come Prince Charles isn't sacked? How come he hasn't resigned? Now, of course, his great mentor was Lord Louis Mountbatten. You know about him, right? It's a family show and my own children are here, so I won't go too deeply into it. But just what else did Prince Charles learn from Lord Louis Mountbatten? You see, Charles is not the aberration here. There's Charles, there's Mountbatten, there's Prince Andrew. There's any number of them. The aberration actually is the Queen. She seems to be the only decent one amongst them. Prince Philip, whose burial we all honoured, including here on the Mother of All talk shows, was a very rum character himself. And our friend who'll be with us this evening, Andrew Loney, had to spend £450,000 of his own money, with the government spending £5 million of yours trying to stop him getting access to Mountbatten's correspondence, which had been paid for by the British public through the lottery fund in order to get access to papers that should and were intended to be in the public domain. And do you know why they spent those millions? Trying to deny researchers access to the correspondence, because it revealed the long line of adultery committed by the very same Prince Philip over the course of his long marriage to Her Majesty the Queen. So Charles ain't no aberrant figure here. It's the Queen that's the aberration. Why do I care? I care because absurdly in 2022 or in 2023, long life to Her Majesty, this man is going to become the head of state. A bag man, a bag lady, talking to trees and carrying around a paper bag in the hope that some Arab sheikh will drop $1 million into it that he won't tell us about, and may be compromised as a result. Maybe has already been compromised as a result. Don't you care that your country's head of state is a bag lady for the Sheikh of Arabi? I myself do, and want to agitate you to care about it also. I told you about Liz Truss. She's already nailed on as Britain's new Prime Minister. As I said on Wednesday on the Galloway show, her mouth opens and shuts right enough, like a fish lying frozen on a slab. The mouth opens and shuts, but nothing comes out. Nothing is there behind those dead eyes. Liz Truss is as dim as she looks, as dim as a 30-watt bulb. Well, I'd like to say you deserve her, but actually it was the liberals and progressives and new Labourites who brought her your way. They're desperately trying to shill for Rishi Sunak now, but they're going to get Liz Truss because we had Boris Johnson. How did we have Boris Johnson? Because The Guardian and its friends in politics destroyed Jeremy Corbyn. They decided they'd rather have Boris Johnson than Jeremy Corbyn. Never let them forget that. They betrayed Britain by their backstabbing political assassination of a man that came just 2,227 votes away from being the Prime Minister of Britain. Then you'd never have heard of Prime Minister Boris Johnson or Prime Minister Liz Truss. Mind you, we've got Keith Starmer, the Labour leader, burning up the inside track. Well, not quite. He made a most ill-advised visit to the great city of Liverpool this week, the great citadel of socialist politics, and the city filled with one of my favourite populations in all the world, and one of my favourites of those is also a guest on the show this week. Audrey White is not just Britain's best-known pensioner. She is not just Britain's battling pensioner. She was battling for trade unionism decades ago. The TUC recognised her as one of the most influential women in British trade union politics decades before. She's been fighting for the real Labour ideals when Keith Starmer was still a mutant Trotskyite in a sect, a groupuscle, now completely forgotten, when he was campaigning for the overthrow of the British monarchy. But now he's a knight. Once a knight is enough to still any such rebellious ideas. Audrey White bearded Keir Starmer in Liverpool. in a video that's now been watched millions of times. She made the big time. Glenda Jackson once played her in a movie. But Audrey, in her own right, has now made the big time, seen by more people than Glenda Jackson's movie. Because Audrey White had the courage to beard Keith Starmer and tell him where he's going wrong and what the consequences of what he's going wrong with are going to be for the mass of the people, not least in Liverpool. Mind you, you can't say Starmer and the new Labour crew aren't decisive. They acted decisively, and the very next day they expelled Audrey White from the ranks of the Labour Party after many decades of Labour membership. Well done, Keith. That's the kind of smack of firm government that's going to take you all the way to oblivion. But first up, it's the aforementioned Andrew Loney, the author of, amongst many other fine books, one on Britain.
Thank you for, I'm a big fan of your show. Great debate, great. And I'm Scottish. I'm very passionate about what's happening there, I had a great mom. She was Scottish, Mary MacLeod. She taught me well. She taught me well at everything, including golf. I love Scotland, and I love the Scottish food. It's great food. I said to Melania, haggis. Look at that. What's more Scottish than that? Me. I am that haggis. She said, what, thin-skinned and full of crap?